Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode is actually a very interesting one. All right, let's go with you, family. All right. So, let's see how we begin. Hopefully, my voice is loud enough and you can hear me. What I would like to immediately share with you is this notion of uh, the linguistic realm. I've been studying how our civilization uses language, and we use language to identify ourselves. Pretty much, we track ourselves in this existential change using subjective phenomena and using language. The bridge between words and worlds is a notion that man has relationship with various ways that reality appears. When I see an object, that object exists outside of me. But when I think of the name, the concept, the in some sense, suddenly when an object which is just an object becomes suddenly a cup, I call it a cup. The name, the idea of the cup, is being generated in my experience in the same way that I have chosen a name to ascribe to me. That means if you ask the common man who they are, they will tell you their name, they will tell you their backstory, they will tell you the things they've done, and pretty much the whole interview. But when you ask them how many times has the answer for this question changed in your life, you'll suddenly understand the playful way that language is meant to be utilized by our awareness. It is not meant to be us, it is a technology for use. Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi has this quote where he says, "Out beyond ideas of right doing and out beyond ideas of wrongdoing, there is a place. I will meet you at that place." And then he says, "When the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about." That means there's states of experience where the duality, the separation of the objective, what is real objectively and what is real subjectively, you not only watch those, see the separation in between, you find yourself in a position where the duality is content with its design. No longer chaos is trying to overcome order. No longer order is trying to overcome chaos. The war of eons ends in the mind of the entity. You understand all your values have been originating with how you have valued yourself. This is why we seek validation from our world, because we are created as a part of it and we want to see how we fit into it. It's an evolutionary urge to fit in, or else we wouldn't join into tribes. It is an evolutionary path that we use concepts and ideas in the linguistic realm, the linguistic simulation. Language has replaced matter in a way where when we look at matter, we see the language. Pretty much your attention, think of it this way: when you wake up in the day, your moment of attention. I'll get into the title a bit uh, later through the talk. If you know me, how I speak, I usually try to build the world before I speak about any movements of the world. The child opens its eyes. It is a moment of pure sight. It is just sight existing. As this sight that is existing is communicated with, the name of the child is repeated. The child begins to notice patterns of individual behavior. It begins to, from a first copy paste mentality, advance itself. Pretty much what I'm telling you is that you have in your childhood you copy pasted your way into selfhood. The moment you became an individual, which psychologists say it occurs by the age of 14 or something, that's when the child has seen enough ways, enough patterns of others to begin to establish a pattern itself. And the road to the advancement of the individual is how they become who they are. You see, there's a personal dimension to life and there's an impersonal dimension to life, and both command your attention and responsibility. In other words, we are no longer required to only be content with the microcosmic activities. We have to wonder about the macrocosm. The moment we could send satellites above our clouds, we had to become responsible for how the universe revealed itself. Ludwig von Wittgenstein, this German philosopher, he has an incredible quote. He says, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. That means, trust me, being accepted in different ways. That's the difference between languages. The way the world is formed, what they pay attention to. You don't understand how much of your life right now is a projection of language classified in unique ways behind your eyes. You don't understand how much of the world has to be generated and maintained. As if something has started, it will change and it will end. Now, we say it will end, but we know the moment we die, many other children are born. We recognize that we are here like this life is like a roller coaster ride. People don't need to freak out too much. They don't need to seek truth too much. A lot of it is involuntary. A lot of it is the processes of nature, regardless of what man thinks. But when man thinks, he can, in some sense, in his own world, in the real world, how would I say it? It's as if, like, right now I'm looking at the world, okay? I'm one person. I'm 1 in 8 billion people on this planet, wondering about what all this means. The first thing I realize immediately is that I have to overcome how the world was told to me. Children are not just told stories at night before they go to sleep. They're not just told bedtime stories. The whole existence is a classification of various stories with various content that applies to various direct experiences. We are alive in such a unique point in history where for the first time our free will is choosing to consciously be beyond the sensory perception. When I looked at meditation, I was like, I remember I spoke to my father, and my father is like, he's a true businessman, okay? And so I was talking to him, and he looked at me, and he's like, these people who meditate in the forest, they're wasting their time. What is this? You know? And of course, he has a very sophisticated outlook on metaphysics as well. But I'm telling you, he didn't see value in the behavior that seemed to be escaping what it had to confront. But what I saw was that was an evolutionary state. That was a moment the person had been conscious of the program of their life. You don't know how much of this life is programmed. A majority of it is programmed by nature. Right now, it's not you who's thinking about, it's not the idea, it's not your ego that's saying, okay, heart, beat, please. You know? You don't ask your heart to beat, it beats. You don't ask life to happen, it happens. You don't ask the world to change, but it changes. So these are inevitable forces that the sooner the person can come into terms with, they can have a breath of fresh air, because the ego is no longer on its mission to eternity. There's two ways, guys. There's two ways that the notion of eternity can be embraced. It can be embraced as an ever present, everlasting conscious attention. Okay, you how would I say it? It's as if you can there's the notion of immortality, there's the notion of eternity. Immortality is the endless, infinite continuity of a form. Eternity is a quality of how something can never leave. You know, as if something that was created, the child got shocked. He's like, how can something that is created be destroyed? And is the destruction the same nature of the phenomena? That means the moment I die, was I the same person when I was the first day I opened my eyes in this world? What was that change? What was the accumulation of various experiences? Why was this brain in some sense like a vacuum recording all the data that was in its waking life? Why was the formation of the consciousness? Why did Carl Jung speak about the subconscious, the unconscious? Why did man's metaphysics and philosophies and various ways he kept the world acknowledged and unknown? Why did scientists come up with the term dark matter and dark energy? And of course, there are some parts of this universe that will forever be dark to see. They're mysteries of existence. There's many of them. For me, the moment I chose to acknowledge life as a series of data, as a various, it's like what became unique is what happened in the moment prior to my conclusion of it. By the way, guys, my computer, I can't type. My computer has an issue with typing. Like the keyboard's messed up. But if there's any questions that anybody wants to ask, if they want me to zoom in on anything I've said so far, you can ask, of course. I'm just trying to tell you that there is a relationship with man, with the self, in which the self is seen to be the process of the world. That means I can want the earth to turn the other way, but the earth will turn the way it is. And so in so many things in life, the mind simulates wantings of future projections. See, it's not wrong to want, but it is wrong to want something which you have been ignorant about, which you have not seen the fullness of its dimensions. Think of it this way. It's like meeting somebody without knowing who they are. Their mind becomes ambiguous to you. That our species evolved through phases of life where they were constantly challenged, and many of those challenges ended the life of human beings. For me, I was like, what is the point of DNA? And I suddenly realized, what is the point of the phone in our hand? It is the collective embrace of a species in which its world is the light of a dying star. As the star dies and its light enters our eyes, the world animates into various forces, but fundamentally preserved through a dualistic frame. That means from the unconscious movement of nature, suddenly something became conscious. It became conscious by being able to separate itself from the dirt of the world. That means man was no longer the world. Man was in a world. That in a world part is subjectively only true. You are separate from the world, not objectively, separately. Objectively, you are atomic. You're standing with the whole cosmos as stardust. But subjectively, how the dynamism of attention from various particles moves. The placebo effect was, people misunderstood it. The placebo effect was not just to be acknowledged as a fact that a person's view creates the view they see. The notion of the placebo effect was that now has come the era where we must explore the inner workings of what we consider to be the mind. And the mind, for me, is the bridge between the known and the unknown. It is bridge between the body and the soul. The soul is another way of saying the unknown intelligence. Okay? And it's not something easy, I'm asking the audience. It's something that in some sense many of our ancestors never attempted because they thought in doing so they would not be themselves. Fear has always struck man's heart. But that's not the point. The point is, what is the most valuable phenomena, or what is the most valuable way we should be looking at 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere? When I say we are in the middle of nowhere, that means whatever that is now here, whatever is currently existing, if it has a value, if it is a story, it is a bubble in emptiness. This is what I consider to be the edge of knowledge. The educational system, probably for the next 200 years, will not acknowledge this notion. Because it is the notion of the end of knowledge. And you'll be like, Mr. Within, what does that mean, the end of knowledge? Isn't the whole point of this whole enlightenment show for the person to seek the true knowing? And I will tell you, this is what's happening. We are breaking from the shell of an idea. The species at some point managed to have ideas, in some sense extract ideas out of phenomena, out of dynamic phenomena, and in doing so now thought it is the idea. That means when a person does a bad action, that bad action defines them, and so their guilt echoes as a person, a sense of them being a person which they never thought they would be. In ancient times, they would say the child would not be a real man until he went to war, because war was happening all the time. And people wondered if they ever was a world where there would not be war. I mean, think about it. Imagine you were a child born in like some sort of medieval set. Pretty much, you are allowing a person to be. You're giving a person a command to, in some sense, destroy something which they can see the same amount of life in as they see in themselves. This is the issue. For me, sometimes it's like, what was his name? Oh my God. Zizek Slavoj, if I'm saying his name right. This man is very, I don't know how to classify him, but I'll tell you, he seems to be somebody who's, he has understood Marxism as a depth where he's his own unique Marxist. But Slavoj Žižek said something very unique, that he was involved in a friendship where I think this occurred when he was in Egypt or somewhere. When he was somewhere, I don't remember exactly where, but he said he suddenly had a friend where him and his friend, whenever they would meet, excuse my language, but I'm just relaying the story Zizek said, you know? He said him and his friend, every time they would see each other, his friend would say like, I'll sleep with your mother, and he would say, I'll sleep with your sister, or something like that. Okay, they would insult one another. And Zizek Slavoj was saying that it was a very unique friendship because every day they would meet each other and intensely release their anger and rage upon one another. But then, after they had released the chaos of the day, the potential chaos that the conversation could go, eventually it went to order. So he was saying that there's various approaches to how intelligence functions. There's so many people on this planet you're going to see where you're going to instantly align with. And there's so many people on this planet you're going to see that you're not going to align with. You're going to just see some people, their minds is not approaching the world the way yours is. And so you may feel that's a differentiation, a difference. You may feel that's an isolation. You may feel that's a sort of shortcoming, downfall, but I will tell you, it is very phenomenal to be different in a world that doesn't seem to be working. I find that if you took an accumulation of all the weird things people have done in this life, you will begin to understand all the various ways eyes have opened. There are no two eyes that are the same on this planet. I am telling you. Religious people are all trying to see the same thing. Yet each one of them is limited to the data of their experiences. It was Meister Eckhart, this Christian mystic, who said the same eyes I see the world are the same eyes. He said the same eyes I see God are the same eyes God sees me. And that's when I recognized theology had somehow given itself a philosophical permission, an unknown philosophical permission. Because let me tell you guys, I've looked through religious eyes and I've also looked through secular eyes, and I've eventually concluded that change is here first. Because the world changes, so shall we. So, what is the seriousness of the world, and why are wars occurring? It always has to do with a system and the continuity of that system. That means institutions are reflections of their creators, which are the people who create the institutions. Do you see? It always, a lot of stuff. Here's the unique thing. I feel we're biological, multidimensional antennas. That's what our brain is. We don't just we don't just follow the program of nature. We also receive unnatural data, and we influence ourselves. That means the ego is like I will tell you. There's some there's been some wisdom culture, certain yogis who they've kind of seen the ego as an abomination, as in some sense a forgetfulness of the natural way that life moves already. So many people think their purpose has to be a story. Who says? Who says that right now the world has to listen to your mind? I understood this when I was very young. There were some points where I wanted to share, communicate, and I noticed there was a as if people gravitated away from my speech. So it made me very self-conscious, and I remember many years of my life I was very quiet. I didn't understand language. I will tell you this. No, I didn't understand language. I understood language very well. I just didn't comprehend its place in society. I didn't understand why it's important for a person who the body appears to be temporary, for a temporary being not to speak. I found that ridiculous. I finally understood what Terence McKenna meant, where he said people asked him, and he's like, there's no point of holding secrets. There's no point. We're like a candle flame who can choose how much its light shines. You are choosing how much the world gets to see the real you, or you are. Trust me, there's the problem of society is an artificial level of performance, and it has to exist in that way because then there would be no such thing as intimacy. There would be no kind of privacy. You see, privacy commanded the external to at least give space to the person's individuality. But where did all that lead? I I can't lie because I feel there is no time. I feel that the value of our lifetime is in the effort of the potential visions we get from it. that means after I can say it's fair to say that after 25 years, after one quarter of a person's life, their mind should have an ability to, in some sense, be able to be itself and be able to distinguish how it is generating the world, how your attention is creating the world, and how the world is a phenomena either created, not either. The phenomena is a phenomena created. That means there's a system here where your eyes open in, but then you begin to realize the way your eyes interpret this system is based on an inner system. There's an inner program. You can say it's the hidden program called soul, called consciousness. We are conscious of the world we live in because energy expresses in that way. What occurs is that we will realize our ancestors were bacteria at the bottom of an ocean if we entertain Charles Darwin's evolution. So we will see that it's an effort of continuity. That's pretty much it. It's as if, trust me, people think the idea of eternity is only in a religious context. No, the idea of eternity is an evolution. What do you call the continuous effort to remain? The continuous effort to be. The world is not just changing, it is changing us. We are here as it changes. But this is your imagination, all the data of your real senses are standing in front of a present awareness wherein every birthday candle you've blown throughout the years, you have still considered it's the same you. There's a reference point. We are all eyes of the universe, thinking that they are people. But this is too chaotic of a notion because the personality took a long time to evolve. So what will happen if we think suddenly we're just objective beings? We will no longer care about language. We will become reckless with it. Language will find, instead of evolving, instead of accelerating, it will decelerate. It will decelerate into an ignorance that stops asking the question that it requires to ask in order to be the answer of the lifetime. You see, I find it's like a video game. Imagine you're in a character in a video game and you think that you are moving yourself. You come to realize the macrocosm is holding the microcosm. Even Plato understood this. He said, as above, so below. So you see, what is above you is having an influence on what is occurring below you. Without the sun, could man exist? Could the eyes be even able to perceive a world? There was a notion where I entertained a hypothesis. There was a time I entertained the hypothesis that evolution is not just, like, there's a notion that evolution could have arose because of particles from one planet, like a living bacteria particle from one planet coming to our planet. You know, we have seen it in a microcosmic way, in a macrocosmic way, and in a current modern way. You know, like, there's many ways we've approached how intelligence is here, okay? But I'm telling you, if there is 0.00 whatever amount of zeros your doubt wants to put in the middle of this, 0.01% chance that there is more dimensions than one, we'll kind of recognize as if our access to higher dimensions has to inquire an element of our direct experience with an element of an awareness of all sorts of data that are accessible to us. You see, when you define yourself, you will constantly be challenged by life. If right now I say I am 100% correct in everything, like, imagine I just think that I am 100, like everything, like, how would I say it? Trust me, it is very easy to put a blindfold. It's after you take a bunch of them off your face, you begin to realize the value of honesty. You begin to realize the value of not allowing your inefficiency to define you. You pretty much your mind takes a shower of no longer entertaining inefficient notions of the self. Because what's the point? I remember I was with a gathering of, I can't say they were close friends, but it was friends of my friends, you know. And so I remember I was there at their party, and in some sense, there came suddenly. It was strange. Sometimes even before I speak, discussions, deep discussions occur around me. It's strange. Pretty much, there was people. I saw a few people. Okay, people. Honestly, I didn't really know well, but they were discussing. They were having this conversation where one of them was showing off their depression to the other. And I had never seen something like this. It was strange. One of them was saying that they went to the psychiatrist and they said the psychiatrist told them they have a certain level of depression. Okay, certain classification of a mental illness known as, I don't know, stress. Pretty much, I saw the idealization of inefficiency. And it made it enraged me, but the rage was not a rage I could do anything about, because I saw that if one person was behaving this way, there were probably many others who were also behaving that way. Also, you know, I kind of saw a world so confused that it has to act by its desire, because what other data does it have? That means if you just believe you're a temporary object, you won't be responsible for the universal sector your intelligence is occurring in. We are intelligence, and then this intelligence appears as the human being. You know, and the human being is like the word life form. Okay? The form part is the human design of it, the biological human aspect of it. That's your form. Okay? But you're also the life in the form. You are what is giving life to you. You are what is giving purpose. When you go and get a glass of orange juice with ice cubes from the fridge, you're giving purpose to your atomic being. The atoms in your body now have a way to be. It's kind of strange. We thought as created creatures, you know, when I entertained the notion that I am, like, when I was younger, I never saw a resistance to the idea of God, because I never saw a personality to God. That means I find that many people think the word God has a definition. For me, God, if it is said to encompass all everything, it means it will also encompass nothing. That means God is within all things. God is within, as if everywhere is one moment of intelligence. Just think about it. That's the only, God was the attempt of giving the universe intelligence, a personal intelligence where the person suddenly had a relationship with their universal sector. I could totally see how it was our early attempts as a civilization. Man has always attempted to contain the world. Every person does it to the best of their ability. Okay, what does that mean? That means when you go look at various intellectuals back in history, these intellectuals, their worldview was actually defined by their occupation. As if the guy was a blacksmith and they asked him, "What do you think? How do you think God is?" And he said, "God is a blacksmith, you know, hitting like the hammer, you know, just like how I hit the hammer, and he's crafting the world or something, you know." And they went and asked the sculptor, "What is God to you?" And the sculptor said, "God is that force that sculpts the world." They went and asked the baker, "What is God?" And the baker was, "God is the force that makes the world into existence." You know? So what I'm telling you, people's actions have been defining their knowledge. Okay? But I feel we are now as a species ready. I was kind of wary of this at first, but then I realized you got to risk it to get the biscuit. You know? You know, the baker understands. You know? You gotta attempt something never attempted before, because why else does history exist? History exists so you see what how far your ancestors went, and now it's up to you. You think exploration has ended? You think just because there's an economical system, the will to know how deep the world continues and how deep the intelligence of the world goes, how far the intelligence goes, that's going to stop? No belief system can stop the will of exploration. That means the reason we say you have a free will is because you can stand in this world in a way where no outer condition has to define how you choose. That is the freedom of mind that the Western society, uh, based on the design, the, the founding fathers of society, Western society understood this. In many other cultures, it was a different spectrum. You see, any part of the world in history that suddenly went too metaphysical too quick, that means suddenly the people began giving shape to the unknown before the technologies of the civilization occurred. Suddenly, it would be as if people would be moved by not only the winds of the world, but subjective winds. You see, it is so powerful, the story you keep yourself in. Because, first of all, you're not a thought, which means it's the character being like, oh my god, as if like the video game character realizes it's as if you friends. So our free will in this dimension, we only see the effect of it. The cause of our free will is in a subjective, deeper phenomenon. Because you see, we are identifying with the visible first. That means the unknown has been decided to be invisible. The moment we choose visibility to be the justification, the invisible has come. You don't understand. The veil of thought is based on the thought you have. And many human beings, they chose to stay away from thoughts. But they didn't realize the greatest service of in a changing world is advancement. I have no higher ideal. That means I can judge no other human being based on only one factor. You are a human being to me when you actually live for what humanity means to you. Too many people have become like, this is the issue. We think the body was here first and then the mind, but we don't realize, as far as the notion, the imagine, the notion of the self is considered, our egos are how our mind was here first, then our body. There are moments on this planet where your mind can become so still, like a pond. When you stop throwing rocks, suddenly the ripples settle. You will suddenly find, like, that was kind of the point of meditation, not to get you into thinking too deeply about things, but just for you to recognize that the simple stands with the complex. And you got to realize, if you have a complex problem, okay, I choose to find simple answers for it, because it's not worth having your life occupied by the same problem. It's one of those things. Either you let go of the problem, or you, in some sense, transform the problem. In some sense, you have an alchemical approach to this life. Negative stuff's going to happen to you. You're going to transform it. Or like Aikido, you never, it's as if you use the force. You just let what is unnecessary, or what is not required, to pass. Seldom did people realize forgiveness could only occur by a person whose mind was free, whose mind has understood what freedom meant. Freedom is not just financial freedom. If you think you're an objective being, you're going to assume that what's the greatest desire? The ultimate experience of life. What is the ultimate experience of life? Fulfilling whatever way your mind has shaped it so far. For me, the issue is, if people don't change their behavior, how can the world be different? You know, somebody was called weird once, and he said that's an honor. I am honored by this person calling me strange and weird. And the guy was like, what do you mean you're honored? You know, and he said, I'm honored because in a world where if in this world you do what everybody else is doing, you will just get their results. You will get the results that everybody else is getting. You have to, any person who in some sense finds themselves uh, more introverted than extroverted, that's kind of life telling you pay attention to how your intelligence functions and then go function with the others. You see, it's one of those things. It's kind of like you don't realize it, but you are indirectly going through training into, in some sense, being a contribution to humanity. Your ancestors would live with such vision, whether you know it or not. You know, the accumulation of all their visions is now you. Your personality is very unique. Let me tell you this: the personality is not understood by many because they avoid the various influences of it. What that means is you can say consciousness was a social development. You can give it a social development. Sorry, you can give it a social dimension. What that means is you're like, it was because of social survival, because of existing in the tribe, that the identity and the free will came into more of a solid emergence. You can say it had a only, it was purely atomic. You can say right now everything I'm saying is just sophisticated mouth noises of an advanced ape, of an advanced, grandchild of a chimpanzee, as evolution tells us. And so, in a world so big that we can't measure it with possibly any sort of measurement ruler, you see the purpose of life is not to own it. The purpose of life is not power. You can choose to be powerful. But you will see the purpose of life is how history blooms. How we would live in ways where if our ancestors saw us, they're like, wow, you guys impress us. Not in ways where our ancestors right now, many of them in their graves are face palming themselves. You know, they're in some sense crying in their graves. You know why? Because we have undervalued what they were saw as the greatest value, the preservation of the nature of phenomena. This is the whole ideal of the traditional. This is the whole mentality of the conservative. Something that had value you preserve. Okay? As if you keep the beautiful alive. And the beautiful is not objective. Subjectively, what is beautiful is an idea that is giving is allowing, is giving wings of efficiency to the person. Free your mind or you will always be enslaved. And I'm sorry to use that word. It might be intense for some listeners. And feel free to turn off this, what I'm saying, and enter the silence, because eventually we all return there. Life is very phenomenal. It is an opportunity of various forces being one moment. You are an intersection of various ways, various dimensions, even your five senses. We say you're an objective being in the three dimensions of space and one dimension of time, and as an objective being you have five senses, right? And that's the mainstream. That's the proper way we say it, we acknowledge it in today's world, modern world. But however, when we look at that, the senses by nature are providing five different streams. You not only can smell things, you not only can see things, you not only can hear things, you not only can touch things, and the full list. You begin to see various patterns of data once observed simultaneously will appear as different dimensions. You can see in for example, a military unit, various people who are acknowledging that they're individuals and their own universe, yet they have to abide by the principles of the same universe. The unit has to act as one. Why did the four musketeers, draw swords in the air all together at one point? Because they realized their honor intersected at one vision. For me, the species does not have time to grow up. It's at that point where we are under war. There's forces that have declared war on the human species. These forces act as qualities of ignorance. These forces are things where the only way we can fight with it is to, in some sense, recognize the value of true, honest exploration of living. Study the world, but study it through your eyes. Because you're spoon-fed to believe you have to have something else or be something else to truly be able. Your mind works with a sort of subconscious authorization system where it needs evidence before it can achieve. And that is blindness. If you needed evidence to achieve, the person would never open their front door because they don't have evidence of the outside world. You know, you cannot always go based on evidence. You will see just what happens on Fridays, in Western countries, in secular societies. What happens? People party. People enter the unconscious. People go. They nullify their rationality. They nullify the solid structure of the day the structure of the whole week they've been living through. So responsibility and discipline arises when you actually zoom in on what life is and how every moment holds its own state of mind. You are an energetic, expressive phenomenon, and you feel you're a thought. Right now, as I'm speaking, let's say you ask me, "Who are you, Mr. Within?" and I'm saying I'm the presence of the moment. Okay, imagine I give you an answer. Now, whatever words I say, could those words be the truth? You know, the paper. How the words animate is their intelligence. So you begin suddenly looking at life and being like, whoa, if I think I'm a body, I take limited responsibility. If I think I am the effort of evolution, I am the inspiration of evolution, then in some sense, how can I tell you you are eternal before you could be temporary? Because why else would the biology continue? Why else would animals fight till their last day? Why else will our species, in some sense, as Dylan Thomas has so elegantly and wisely said,